Bom dia, boa tarde, boa noite, or whatever the case may be. My name is Marcus, and I am the host of the Black Brazil Today YouTube channel, as well as the blackbraziltoday.com blog, where I analyze Brazil from the perspective of race. So tonight, the piece that I'll be going over is called "What Would Carnival in Brazil Be Like Without the African Influence?" I know I say this quite often, but I don't think it's a topic that I can fully cover in just one video. And as you know, most of you probably, or people who follow the situation in Brazil, know that this is the end of February. So Carnival is actually already over, but it's like behind the scenes, the preparations for the next Carnival start almost right after, the last one ended. So that gives me a lot of time to discuss this issue. I mean, before, during, or after the Carnival season, these are some important details that people who may not be familiar with how, the history and the cultural relevance of Brazilian Carnival. And as the article is going to get into, the Black and African influence on what the big party is all about. So that's what I'm going to get into today. Hope you enjoy this piece. If you definitely, if you get something out of this this video, feel free to like. I'd love to know what your comments are when I get to the end of the video. Definitely consider sharing this video. Subscribing to the channel and pushing that notification bell so that you'll be on alert when my new videos come up. So let me get into this one. So for those of you who follow things that go down in Brazil, you're probably well aware that another Carnival season has come and gone. For me, Brazilian Carnival is one of those topics that, as I've said repeatedly on this channel, I could devote an entire blog or channel to it. Whether we look at Carnival from an historical perspective, look behind the scenes to know all of the preparation that goes into the final show, the dancing girls, the financing, the themes of the processions in Sao Paulo or Rio's Carnivals, there would be enough to cover that I could hire a full-time staff to help with these reports. As my channel and blog are all about analyzing Brazil from the perspective of race, one of the topics that I'd like to cover, and in reality, these could actually be broken into two topics, are the Black elements and the contribution to Brazilian Carnival as we know it, but also recent complaints that Afro-Brazilians have made about how the movers and shakers behind the scenes seem to be continuously attempting to decrease the Afro-Brazilian element of the show. This is something I've had a lot of interest in over the years. This is just a screenshot of an article from 2019 on the blog called Apartheid Continues. In Salvador Bahia, Black Blocos Afros groups, they suffer from lack of sponsorships from Carnival. If you're familiar with how blocos work, you have just regular blocos, and then you have those who have African-oriented cultural influences. And this has been going on in Bahia for years, where, groups who are more Afro-oriented, they suffer from, lack of financing, the lack of sponsorship, lack of, primetime spotlight on television. And it goes on and on. This has been going on for years. You have this other one that's called Traditionally Queens and Godmothers of the Drum Beat During Carnival. Are Black women losing their places to white women? This is something that, people have been talking about this. Again, I've noticed this just in the last decade, but it's probably been longer than that. Some of the most popular carnivals coming out of Rio and Sao Paulo. And you have the dancers and you have the queens of the Carnival. And what Black women are complaining about is that, traditionally roles that were where Black women were given prominence, they're slowly starting to see how white women who may not even have direct connections to Carnival taking their places. So this is an article also from a few years ago, and it says, speaking specifically of the situation in Sao Paulo, a viewer named Israel weighed in on what he's seeing. In the Sao Paulo Carnaval 2015 parade, we can see the profile of a people who are victim of embranquecimento, meaning whitewashing, who seem conformed because at least outline reactions of protest for the loss of their space in the party that found it still in the senzalas or the slave quarters during the slave period maintained by slaveholders. They are being deliberately struck from their cultural activities, strongholds of the cultural training base of the Black Brazilian people. Observe, there are few Blacks who are in their role as a primary element, as protagonists of a party, so they are increasingly in positions of subordination, as in slavery, doing heavy-duty services. Here's another one. There are white people in the Samba Carnival. It's also a time to discuss privileges when people not connected to the culture get the exposure and the money. So I think this one is from 2018. And this is what people are talking about, just, this influx of the influence of white people who may not have, put in all of the work to be involved in this big party. And they are taking over roles and positions in the Carnival that traditionally have gone to Black Brazilians. What else do we have here? In terms of Bahia, it's a whole nother thing. Sao Paulo, Rio, and Bahia, those are the three carnivals that I really focus more on, even though there's other parts of the country that have tremendous carnivals as well. You look at what's going on in Pernambuco. But the top article here is from 2021. It says, with no sponsorships, Bahia's Black artists will do no live carnival shows, but top white artists attain various sponsors and they will perform. Again, apartheid continues. This is I've already discussed this the title of this article just a few minutes ago. This is okay, so this is the same one. So let me see. Okay, Black Carnival groups provoke controversy in their bid for visibility. In Black Bahia, white groups continue to take the lion's share of revenue. So this is an ongoing discussion that, a lot of people want to push it under the rug. Why are you bringing these politics into Carnival? Well, because it needs to be discussed. So these complaints can be applied to Rio, Sao Paulo, Salvador Bahia, and probably other cities where the great show takes place. But before I can get into the elements that the powers that be seem to be trying to diminish, I thought it would be a good idea just to discuss what is Black or African about Rio de Janeiro's Carnival, as it is perhaps the most well-known outside of Brazil. So to start the discussion of Rio's Carnival, we can start with the music that is most associated with Carnival, and that sound is called Samba. The word Samba itself is a word of African origin. The raucous sound is created with a wide array of instruments such as the cuica, berimbau, and the danza. While it is true that several African ethnic groups were brought to Brazil during the transatlantic slave trade, the Bantu are believed to have had the strongest influence on the Brazilian samba. The roots of samba actually have origins in the state of Bahia, with Black folks from this state migrating to Rio de Janeiro. When I hear that, it just kind of reminds me of how the connection between the Mississippi blues and, these Mississippi musicians who would migrate to Chicago. The same thing, you had this connection between Bahia and Rio in the development of the samba. The rhythm of the samba was set by hand claps, tambourines, as well as other sounds created with cymbals and knives. The groove was spread throughout the lower class neighborhoods and became a symbol of strength, resistance, and the continuity of culture. Soon, these Black communities in Rio would develop the escolas de samba, or samba schools. The samba school bateria, or the percussion ensemble, were made up of a significant number of alabés and the ogás. The percussionist responsible for the ritual of the candomblé drums. Candomblé being an Afro-Brazilian religion that has similarities with Nigeria's Yoruba, Haitian Vodun, and other religions in the Caribbean with strong African influences. These are just some very, classic photos from, probably the 60s and 70s, the Black participation in Rio's Carnival. The enredo is a type of samba that uses music and lyrics to present a plot in the samba school's theme. I know a lot of people have seen these, the Carnival progressions that happen in, Sao Paulo and particularly Rio. And if you don't really know what's going on behind the scenes or what is going on in the actual procession, you see that this huge group in these just dazzling costumes and all these multicolored costumes as they move forward in sort of like a march. But The lyrics and the dance and the costumes are presenting a story, a particular theme that goes with every one of these processions. You know, in every Carnival group, they compete, you know, to come in number one and win the prize. They're you know, another thing that came up this past year, this with the Carnival that just passed, the complaint was, why are most of the judges white? So we see this new consciousness is going on among Black Brazilians for years. The questions that they're bringing up now were just kind of things that were just kind of ignored. Nobody really paid attention to it. But like I said, in the last decade, 15 to 20 years, you've seen this rising of this consciousness where so many people have rejected this idea, okay, Brazil doesn't have any race problems, when they look and they find that, you know, Afro-Brazilians are excluded in so many areas of the society, even in a place like, in an event like Carnaval, where Afro-Brazilians have had such a strong cultural influence on this event. Let me see. So over the years, there have been numerous Samba schools that have presented important facets of Afro-Brazilian history during Carnival processions. These processions have historically given space and visibility to an Afro-Brazilian population that has long been excluded and made invisible in Brazilian society. This can't be understated. You know, when you turn on it, this is changing. It has changed. I'll say I can recognize there have been changes, but I just remember when I first started going to Brazil, it just seemed like you just didn't see Black people in prominent places. You know, all of the advertisements, the billboards, they all featured white Brazilians. All of the people that you saw on TV, if you did see Black people on TV, they were in, you know, subordinate positions. They play subordinate roles in all of the television novellas, you know, the Brazil soap operas. The journalists that you saw on TV, it was just like everywhere you looked. And people accepted that for so long. But like I said, with a growing consciousness, people are starting to wake up out of this stupor that says this country is a racial democracy. Let me see. What did I say? Long excluded, made invisible in Brazilian society. With their sambas telling the stories, Afro-Brazilian culture has been preserved and continues to thrive to this day. It must also be pointed out that Brazil's Carnival mixes a number of other cultural elements, but it is one of the main vehicles and rare spaces in which Afro-Brazilian culture can be freely expressed. The Samba schools responsible for these productions of Afro-Brazilian culture themselves originate in the poor communities known as the favelas in the surrounding hills of Rio, the marvelous city, where Black and brown people are the dominant cultural force. Now, this is the idea. A lot of people have felt this way for years, that, okay, every year during Carnival, you know, let the Negroes come out, you know, give them the spotlight for this, you know, week, you know, long celebration. But then for that 1 week there, they dance, they celebrate, they bring their culture to the avenue. And then it's like Carnival is over. Okay, y'all go back to y'all, go back to the hood, go back to the hills where you came from. We'll call you back next year. That's just kind of like how people have felt once they, you know, they pull back the curtain and see how they're treated before, during, and after Carnival. So with this brief intro, I wanted to delve a little further into the importance of the Black and African influence in Rio's Carnival. To do so, I will feature a recent interview by the website Mundo Negro, which discussed this question with Juarez Xavier, a professor at Unesp, or the Sao Paulo State University. This was a really big and highly celebrated Carnival procession. I think it's from like maybe 2019, and they portray slavery for the plot of their particular procession. I can't remember what school this is, but I've got an article on the blog somewhere talking about this. It was a huge display. You know, people talked about this this particular theme for this particular Carnival from this Samba school. They talked about it for weeks. It's one of those Carnival plots and themes that's going to go down in history as one of the most memorable. So what would Carnival in Brazil be like without African influence? This piece is, again, taken from the Mundo Negro website, and it was written by Isadora Santos. The Brazilian Carnival became world-renowned for the Samba school parades, and in recent years for the mega blocos that drag crowds through the streets of the country's capitals. Although the festival did not originate in the country, it received a huge contribution from Black culture, which made our Carnival so Black that it is hard to think of what the celebrations would be like here without the percussion that pulsates in the Samba schools, without Samba itself, and without the marchinhas. These are marchinhas are like, the march songs. Marchinhas are just, it's a type of rhythm that you find in like marching bands, going all the way back, maybe, I don't know, 70, 80 years, which were born in the Black universe that influenced the musicality of Chiquinha Gonzalez or Chiquinha Gonzaga, author of the song Abri Aulas. So this is Juarez, the professor from UNESP, he's being interviewed in this particular piece. We talked to the anti-racist activist, professor and vice president of UNESP, Juarez Xavier, about the origin of the party in Brazil. When asked if he believes that there would have been Carnival in Brazil if Africans hadn't been kidnapped here, he says that there would have been, but the party wouldn't have been the way we now know it. So what would Carnival be like in Brazil without the African influence? So he says, this is the professor speaking. No doubt there would be Carnival. There would be Carnival in Brazil, but it would be a white Carnival, like the Carnival you have in Europe, in Venice, for example. Carnival is a fundamentally European invention and was dyed Black by the Africans. This Carnival that we have in Brazil and some parts of the United States and parts of Latin America and the Caribbean is Carnival of the Black digital. Carnival with the Black presence and what is exceptional about it in Brazil. So this is a picture of Chiquinha Gonzaga. He's going to talk a little bit about her, one of the first female and one of Brazil's most important composers at the time. First, that it incorporated the whole cultural complex, Black African. It is important to remember that the first person to make a marcha specifically for Carnival was Chiquinha Gonzaga, who was the daughter of an enslaved Black woman who was freed at the baptismal font, and her grandmother was a Black African enslaved woman. So Chiquinha, who, with the musical education she received from her father, who was a white man, managed to create this synthesis between Carnival and Black African culture, he said, referring to the creation of the Marchinha song Abri Aulas, rather. So this is Chiquinha as a little girl. The professor explains that the Carnival as we know it today in the country was built by the Black population in the 20th century. This is him speaking again. So quote, in the 20th century, the Black population not only dyed Carnival Black, they built the Carnival we have. It built the mechanism of the Carnival that we have. First, it gave the Carnival the typology it has today. In urban spaces, it built the most important social technology arrangement that were the schools, which are an extremely important space of articulation for the Black population, where the Black population recovers the Black African values. It is from sociability and musicality, dancing. Of all these important values, it was the first space in which Blacks had the possibility to own property in the urban sector. The Samba schools were Black territories, urban Black quilombos. They allowed the Black population to take root in the urban space when the process was the sanitation, expelling the Blacks to the outskirts of the periphery. This made the Black population recover something that slavery just destroyed, which was the sharing of ancestral knowledge. He packed a lot in this last paragraph. If you know the history of Rio, you know that after slavery, Black people were pushed away from the downtown of Rio. Like the elites they wanted to build a first-class city. And Rio, they chose to model Rio after some of the influences they got from Paris. And so as they wanted to be recognized as a world-renowned city, they didn't want to have Black people in this area, like the downtown region of Rio, where, if foreigners were to come there, they get this impression like, wow, Rio was all Black. So Black people were in essence pushed out to the periphery of the city. And again, stay there. And during Carnival, they would come down from the hills and celebrate for the Carnival, the yearly Carnival. But for most of the year, they wanted these Black people away from the glare of cameras or the foreign tourists who was coming into the country, because besides the process of embranquecimento, or whitening the population, they wanted to present a white population. So slavery ended in Brazil, and it was like Black people were, left on their own accord. Like, hey, you're free, go and build a life. There was no help from the government or anything like that. This is what I'm saying. When you uncover this history, matter of fact, there's a documentary that's coming out that's talking about the racial nature, the racial politics behind the construction of Rio de Janeiro, how they eventually decided to move the nation's capital out of Rio de Janeiro to Brasilia, its current capital, and since 1960 or so. And that was part of the reason was to get away from all of this Blackness in the city of Rio. Looking forward to seeing that documentary. The other thing that he points out here is that the Samba schools were Black territories. They were like urban Black quilombos. Now, quilombos, again, which are still spread out all over the country of Brazil, is that they're what we call in the United States the maroon societies, these areas where Black slaves escaped from slavery and built their own community. So in Brazil, these places are called quilombos. So they made of Carnaval like another quilombo. It's like Black culture just took over Rio's Carnaval. And as they said, the Carnival in Rio today wouldn't be what it is without that Black and African influence. Again, some really great pictures from, maybe 30, 40, 50 years ago of Carnaval. Just as the Samba schools contributed to the scenario of Black resistance in the urban space, the street blocos, again, these are Carnaval groups, also became representative for the maintenance of African culture. So he continues, the technology that we have of Carnaval is Black. If you take it from the point of the blocos, even the white blocos, the logic of the bloco, the music, the percussion is Black, fundamentally Black. And if you take the Samba schools, I don't even have to say it. Even with the whitening of the Samba schools, every social technology, this creative and productive arrangement built through the 20th century is Black, explains the specialist. So this is something that a lot of people online are talking about. This is taken from the Instagram page of a guy named Alan Soares. And Alan Soares is one of the founders of what they call the Movimento Black Money. It's the Black Money movement, where the founders of this organization are trying to encourage Brazil's Black community to, support Black businesses. Okay, so it's called the Movimento Black Money. So this is a post that he did. I'll probably get to that also. It says that Carnaval está ficando cada vez mais branco, saying Carnaval is becoming more and more white. This is an ongoing discussion, and people are calling it out right now. The whitening or the whitewashing of Carnaval. Whites go where the money is. He continues. This is, again, Juarez Xavier. When the televised Carnival comes, that's when you start to have the construction of this white Carnival. It starts with the Samba schools from this perspective that I talked about, from the Carnavalescos, the Carnival, the people who are responsible for creating the Carnival, the actual putting together of the whole procession, the costumes, the music, the dance, all of that is put together by a person they call a Carnavalesco. I mean, that those totally alien storylines that the white is what appears in the standards. They are more important standards than, for example, the bateria, again, the percussion ensemble, than the people who are dancing samba or sambando. Then they get into the direction of the Samba schools. Then they get into the structure of the Samba schools. So it is a process of whitening of the Samba schools starting in the 1960s because money starts to be made, explains Juarez Xavier, explaining the great number of white people that became interested in the Carnival of the Samba school. So again, what we have here, big money gets involved when they find out that this Carnival can be a big money maker. Okay, so then, the white folks come in with their money and they start, having huge influence in the Carnival and in the Samba schools. Where have we heard these type of stories before? The revival of Black values in Brazilian Carnival. Even though we are living a scenario of whitewashing of the signs of Black heritage that make up Carnival, there is resistance in the blocos afros, such as Ile, for example, play an important role in maintaining Black culture and aesthetics in the celebrations. Now, Ile is important bloco afro in Salvador, Bahia. They came about, and I think in about 1974, when black people were basically excluded from Bahia's Carnival. I mean, how can that be in a city and state that's is considered the African center of the country? But they had to come up with their own bloco because they wanted to bring their blackness into Carnival. So there's a lot of stories I've had to talk about Ile Aye. They started off, they wanted to call the name of their bloco, they wanted to call it Black Power in English, or it might have been in Portuguese, like Poder Negro. I can't remember whether they was going to just use the English term, but they were told by outside forces like that wouldn't be a good idea. So then they turned to the name Ile Aye. So he continues. The African blocos, they are the possibilities for the constitution of a Black identity, for the political mobilization of the Black population, for the constitution of monetized or non-monetized arrangements, for the possibility of confronting negro politics, racism in Brazilian society. Therefore, there are important possibilities in these blocos. And I think that aesthetics is important. It is a form of producing valid knowledge about reality, and that is why Black aesthetics in confronting racism is also a very efficient political discourse in the fight against racism in Brazil, concludes Professor Juarez Xavier. So I would like to know your thoughts about this, because these racial politics that more and more Black Brazilians are talking about, this is something that's been going on for decades. So when you turn on, some of you have seen, I mean, nowadays it's easy to just turn on YouTube and see whatever year and whatever Samba school you might want to see on YouTube. Years ago, when I first started really digging into Brazilian Carnival, there was this store that I used to go to in Chicago. It doesn't exist anymore. This was in the day when you still had a lot of vinyl record stores. And I would find these stores in Chicago that had these, at the time, VHS tapes of Brazil's mostly Rio Carnival. And it was just a fascinating look at Carnival. But again, when you're just looking at it on television or on a tape or now YouTube, you don't really understand what the racial politics are about. So this is something that Black Brazilians are really pushing for these days. Like, we're the ones who gave Carnival the flavor that it has today, and you're trying to push us out of the spotlight now. So keep this in mind. Obviously we have another year before Carnival season comes back again, but these are some of the politics that, Black Brazilians are speaking on these days. It's not just one big party. It's a lot more going on behind the scenes, whether we're talking about Carnival in Sao Paulo, Rio, or Bahia, or any other place. What is it that Black Brazilians brought to the party that they're not being recognized for? And slowly, the powers that be are trying to just like erase them from Carnival. This is something that a lot of Black Brazilians have been speaking on for a number of years now. So I'm going to end this video here. Look forward to hearing what you think about, what you thought about this article. Definitely drop a comment in the comment section. I see a lot of really good conversation going on in that comment section. I appreciate you all for all of your comments. I try to participate as much as I can. Drop your comments on this video. Definitely subscribe to the channel, share this video, start a conversation, click on the notification button so you'll be updated, you'll be alerted when I put new videos up. And with that said, I'm going to end this here and invite you all to come back to see my next video.